because TCU just went into Austin as a 7-point underdog. The offense did not light up the scoreboard, and yet the Horned Frogs came away as decisive winners. Now they go into Waco as narrow favorites against the Bears. Baylor, of course, the reigning Big 12 champions. Do you think the TCU, what are the expectations for the kind of performance? After we saw a very un-TCU TCU game, what are the expectations for what kind of game this is going to be?
Tom, are you with me? Are you sticking on the TCU like kind of bandwagon? You've been the one that stayed true to it. Are you staying with it?
Yeah, I mean, I have concerns right now. I think TCU, like we talked about it on the reaction show last night, I think if you go resume, TCU deserves to be ranked higher than it is. I think we talked about last week with the Texas TCU preview. Like, I understood why Texas was favored. Still thought it was ludicrous that Texas was favored against TCU because I thought TCU was a better football team. And I've been on here and I've said that Baylor, I said Baylor's not going to win the Big 12. I'm not a big fan of this Baylor team. But, like, Duggan didn't play well against Texas. And if you look back to the week before, he didn't play all that great the week before either. The last few weeks, his numbers have been kind of on a decline, and that passing attack overall has been kind of on a decline. Now, one of it was Quentin Johnston got hurt early in the game, and obviously that clearly had an impact on what he was able to do for the rest of that afternoon. But I have some slight concerns that offense is maybe not hitting a wall, but teams are doing a better job of figuring it out and limiting it. Like Texas did a brilliant job last week. I thought the one thing the Longhorns I really enjoyed in that game was their defensive game plan. I thought they did an excellent job of limiting the big plays, keeping everything in front of them, and limiting what Quentin Johnston was able to do, because too often the TCU offense becomes Quentin Johnston or bust. So if we're able to see that happen again, with more teams getting more tape on what they're trying to do and figuring it out and figuring out ways to stop it, seeing what Texas was doing to stop it, I do have some concerns, because I think this is a tough game. And can their defense perform like that 2 weeks in a row if they need to pick themselves up and bail them, pull themselves out of a fire? I don't know, because I love TCU. I love what it's done, but it's put itself in a lot of dangerous situations. And we see in college football week after week, teams that put themselves in those situations, they get caught eventually.
That's what I thought going into the Texas game, though. I thought that was going to be the game. And if you ask me which roster scares me more, I would say absolutely. So why would we even be concerned about this with Blake Shapen coming off his worst performance? I think Kendre Miller becomes even more critical. And it's interesting, as the offense and Max Duggan have kind of sputtered, they've given Kendre Miller the ball more often, and he's taken it and ran with it to where he's all of a sudden able to establish himself. And I think the defense is getting right at exactly the right time.
So if you look at what Baylor did, right, from bye week on, they've actually been really impressive, and they laid one massive egg. So they had their bye week on October 7th. They go to West Virginia. They traded punches. That's back when West Virginia was a little bit healthier, before they really, really cratered. And then Shapen gets hurt, and they lose it late. Then they really smoked Kansas. I mean, the final there was what, 35-23, and they controlled it through. I mean, they always had between a 2 and a 3 score lead, and I was just sitting there with my Kansas ticket hoping I could backdoor that thing. Now, then they go on the road to Texas Tech next week. Lubbock's not an easy place to play, and they smoke Texas Tech. All right. Then they go on the road again, and they beat Oklahoma, which, Oklahoma's not great, but it's still a quality road win. Last week, they laid total egg against Kansas State. I mean, that was a non-competitive game. They get outgained by like 100 yards. Decent bit of that, I think, was late. But, I mean, I don't really want to discount everything they've done over the past month just because they laid an egg against Kansas State. Teams have bad games sometimes, and that's okay. It doesn't mean Baylor is all of a sudden terrible. I think TCU is a good football team, maybe a really good football team. I think they do have the quarterback edge here, and that would scare me a little bit, because I think Joe Gillespie is a hell of a coordinator for TCU's defense. But even though Baylor's defense has not been great this year, and Tom has been on this and he's been nailing it, I can't get it out of my mind that maybe Dave Aranda has something for these guys here. Maybe he generates some turnovers. Baylor can still be physical running the football sometimes, and TCU's defensive line is not quite what Kansas State has. Kansas State has, I think, more future pros on its D-line than what TCU has. And so if they're able to make them a little more one-dimensional, I could see Baylor pulling this off.
Yeah, I think one thing Danny touched on that it's going to be important. This has to be a Kendre Miller game because I do think that is the one area you can really get Baylor's in the run game. You can move the ball on them very effectively.
What are Baylor fans feeling good about this team? They feeling good about the chances of this? Because you're right that they laid an egg, but that was an egg in a blackout, in a home game at night that everybody was really fired up for, and it was a bad performance. You think that they're going to be able to get back up? Number 4 comes into town, then the atmosphere is going to be crazy because that can be McLean Stadium can be a pretty awesome home field advantage. Like that place can get up and go from time to time. Do you think that do you think there's any hangover just from the atmosphere around that program?
I don't know what their Thanksgiving break schedule is. That could be challenging if it's no school that week. Kids decide to bounce, get home a week early. I don't know what the semester looks like. I don't know what the class schedule looks like. Early kick is always a little bit challenging, but I would think they'd have to bring it when you're playing a top 4 team. I mean, I would think you'd have a pretty good atmosphere.
Is this the Big Nude Saturday game?
Let's see.
It is, but without Joel Klatt, right? Because he's doing the USC UCLA game because the Big Ten deal.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I don't like the early start for this one, but anyways.
I don't either.
Oh, but you will like Jason Benetti on the call, your boy.
Yes. Benetti's great.
He is awesome.
Yeah.
That's true.
Chicago. Jason Benetti and Brock Heward on the call for Baylor hosting TCU in the early kick.